Hi everyone, my name is Long, and this video is an updated version of the previous one of my text RPG. So in this version, I have cleaned up the code and added more functionalities. So I will first run the program. So, firstly, I removed the old picture here and added a map that sort of like a guide for the player. And section 1 and section 3 are mostly the same, but what I added is section 4. So it's a riddle solver. So I am tall when I'm young, and I am short when I'm old. What am I? So if the player answers wrongly, like human, then the player will die and the game will restart. So the correct answer for that is candle. And this one is bank. And as you can see, the player gain a large amount of health and mana. Oh no, this this allows the player to still win the game if they choose session 1 to enter first. So as you can see, the player loses a lot of health and mana after enter session 1, and if they enter session 2 and 3, they will still cannot win the game. But if they enter section 4, they can still win the game because of the health and mana. Yeah. And okay, firstly, I will talk about the research question and the background. So the research question is how I make a text RPG in C++ using Splashkit library. Yes, Splashkit. The background to this topic is related to me, the creator. So I have always liked RPG games, especially The Witcher 3. And from the characters to the world building, everything is done so perfectly that it inspired me to make one. Mine is nowhere near that, but it still brings me great joy in making it. So what is different from the old game? So this one, I have cleaned up my code, removed some unnecessary things, and I have added object-oriented programming and graph theory. So I will first talk about object-oriented programming. So I put everything in a class. And in the main function, I only call the class and call the void run, which is responsible for mostly like calling every functions like the int main does. And so why did I choose object-oriented programming to implement in my game? Well, because it makes my code more manageable and I can easily scale it, meaning I can add more functionalities. I have put my structs, enums, and variables and a function in the private. Here the private, the enum is I set here and I call it in the private, and the function in the private. So why I have do it like that? Well, because to prevent direct access to it and ensure my code is controlled and integrity, meaning it is consistent and valid. And I put most of my functions in the public. I put it there because I want to directly access it. For example, the map, to draw the map in the game menu, or the health of the player to minus or gain health for the player, and many other functions with it corresponding, and many other functions. So now we'll talk about some important parts the viewer needs to understand to have a more general idea of what my code is. And the first one is I have added here this and this. So this and these functions, if you pay attention to the last video I make, I hard code a lot of the player mana, player health, and I don't want that. So I have added some function to sort of control that, and I only call it to manage the player health or to give them health. I also added some Boolean values. So the reason why I added Boolean values is because to prevent the player to constantly losing health and when calling gain mana or minus mana, because I'm calling it in a game loop, I'm calling it in the do while. So the Boolean, so this prevent the constantly losing health and mana. Another important part, which I didn't talk about last time, is this for loops. So this one allows the player to type numbers from 0 to 9, and this one allows the player to type characters from A to Z. This one I recently added for the riddles, and this one is for basically the whole game. Next I want to talk about the user input. So this section, this controls the player input. Like if they enter number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, then which section will they be moved to? And it corresponding to this one is that if the player moves to section 1, then what will appear on the screen? So if the player moves to section 1, there's an arc will be drawn and some text will appear on the screen. And now I will talk about the graph theory, which I think is the most important part of this text RPG, because using graph theory I can clean up my code. Like the scene transition is very smooth, and it just helped me add more functionalities like the maps. So firstly, how it helped me transit between scenes more smoothly, well, because I set rules in place. So here I call an under order map from the game section enum called graph, and here's the representation of each enums, each things in the enums. So each to understand more clearly, I would use a bit of graph theory in this with math. So the game section enum is the vertex. This is the vertex, and this one, and this one is the nodes. Oh, this one is a node as well. So in each node, the player can go to other nodes, the subnodes, and it just makes the code to set the rules in place. So, and I also added a function. I've also added the function move to section, where basically this code is checking if the player, if the rules or the condition is met, then the game section will move the player to the code section. So like this, move to section is all satisfies the condition of the rules I have set in place in the menu. The rules of the menu, yeah, the player can only transit between section 1, 2, 3, 4 in the menu, so it's met. And now about the draw map. I first call the position X and Y and the string for the name. So here's a position on the screen with X and Y and the name of a few sections that I want to add. And this is just like for the foundation, and this one is for for drawing the map. So this function is they draw each node and each section. So it's drawing this thing. And this one is connecting between the nodes using the edge, and this one is just for drawing the entire map. And I will call this one in the game loop. So the auto, what's interesting is the auto. So the auto is just a thing in C++ where it auto detects variable without stating what it is. So if I don't put the auto, then the code will be more complicated. And next, another thing that is interesting about graph theory is I can prevent player from re-entering a section. Because if you remember correctly, in section 1, there's no options about leaving it, unlike section 2, 3, and 4 where player can move back to the conjunction and go to another menu, to another section. But in section 1, the player cannot do that. So this is very important. I've added, and I will scroll it down to here, this one. In the if statement, I have put an if and AND. So it checks if section 1 is if section 1 is in visited section, and if so, insert section 1 to visited section if player enters section 1. So basically it means that if the player enters section 1, they cannot re-enter it again unless the game is restarted. And I think that's about it about the code. Now we will talk about the outcome. The outcome is just like the story of the code, so I will just go through it. So the player is an adventurer exploring a cave. The cave has 4 sections, and in the first section, the player will encounter an orc, and the player will either defeat it or get defeated. Then the player will return to the conjunction. The second and third section are very similar, as there are only 3 options, and entering the right one, they will be rewarded or they will be punished. The only difference is that the second section gives and minus health, and the third section is with mana. The fourth section asks the player 2 riddles by typing a single word, and if they enter correctly, then they will be greatly rewarded. But if they enter wrongly, it will cost them their life. The second, third, and fourth option will lead the player to the final boss, where they must defeat the boss in order to win the game. And the game is over once the player finishes with the boss. So in conclusion, I think the game captures mostly everything a basic text RPG features would need. There are choices that the player can make, and each choice they make will have their own consequences. And the game also has health and mana system, and the game will restart if either those data reaches 0 or lower. But I think there is still room to improve, because my game is quite simple. And in order to make it into a full-fledged RPG or text RPG, I think I would need some inventory system, add more depth to the game, and maybe some interaction with the NPC, and maybe some possible quests that the player can make. And yeah, I think that's about it.